before I jump into the content, my name is Otavio Lopes. I'm from Brazil, working for Accenture for many years in the space of food and agribusiness. So I started my career in Brazil, working for sugar and biofuel companies. Moved later to the Netherlands, where I had the opportunity to work with a completely different context on the agribusiness space. And 2.5 years ago, I moved to Singapore, where I'm based out of today, working with food and agri here as well. So I lead the agribusiness practice for Accenture that takes into consideration grains, so coarse grains, protein, animal protein, dairy, and we have here trading companies, meat companies, dairy companies, palm oil companies, fresh fruit companies. So it's really diverse and a big animal that we slice it into different pockets because there are different peculiarities for the sub-industries. Okay, so I will start with something that I think we've seen in all the presentations, all the forces that are shaping the future of food production. Okay, so we have extreme growth from the socioeconomical perspective, more people to nourish, and we have a tremendous concentration. And just a pause here. I'm talking right now. I'm talking before COVID. Okay, so just starting by saying that this is pre-COVID. So we have food demand doubling and becoming different year over year. So channels are moving, the way people's consuming is moving. So from a geopolitical perspective, we've been facing challenge for quite some time. They are getting worse, but trade barriers, different policies on incentives in different countries are creating a lot of attrition. We've seen food security risk for a long time as well. I think this is becoming exponential right now, but it's not a new topic. Contamination outbreaks, it's something that it's not new as well. So we had events on the animal protein many times, on the milk many times as well, dairy products. So this is something not new. From a health perspective, I think there is much more consciousness from the consumer perspective today. So first of all, there is much more refusal to things that are using antibiotics or hormones. People is becoming much more conscious about obesity and diabetes as well. So you see a lot of, let me say, healthier choices with less sugar, more natural ingredients, and this is becoming really a bold stuff, and it's changing the game. And I think in the last 5 years, increased quite significantly. Following a bit of the consumer consciousness perspective, that is all the environmental characteristic of food production. So there is a strong pressure up to the value stream. So the upstream sector is really under pressure to be more conscious about the environmental. So all the things related to water, soil, use of chemicals, labor. So this is really increasing, and it's changing dramatically as well. So it's something that we're going to see later in the presentation that is taking even more relevance in the agenda. And digital or technology was coming as well transforming. So beyond the consumerism, beyond the way people is producing, there is always the technology components that are somehow catalyzers for the change. Okay, and in the agri space, technology is not something new. We've seen the use of technology for many, many years, but I think the maturity levels and the economical viability of certain technologies like cloud computing, sensors, and storage costs. So this, the convergence of maturity of these technologies is properly enabling the use of them and catalyzing and making exponential the use of technology. And all the science about the DNA engineering, the food engineering, that is really bringing improved ways of nourish by bringing, let me say, ways of feed or nourish with less quantity, with more nutritional properties, the advent of all these things related to cell-based, plant-based meat, and all these DNA-based diets concepts that is really gaining a lot of force in the world. So this is a context that I would say it's a context that we've been surfing for the last years, okay? And trying to summarize this into three realities and three things that are, let me say, driving the change, is that the first that is, I would say that is the trigger for the transformation, that is the consumer. So I think that the consumer much more conscious, the consumer that is much more demanding for things that is sustainable is changing. The consumer that is looking for convenience, that is busy on the day-to-day and that wants to have, let me say, a fruit that is probably difficult to open in the office. He's demanding for convenience for food. The same consumer that is becoming on the 40s and or on the 50s, or even the youngest ones that are looking for healthiest choices. So they are, instead of just craving for the nice burger made of Australian ground beef, super good quality, they are accepting to go for something cell-based or plant-based, even not, let me say, I would say having the same taste and appeal, but he understands that this is a perfect healthy choice for him. So consumer is properly making a big shift on all of these. The marketplace is something that we've been facing, and more recently as well, new ways of consumption, new channels. So it's not not just the e-commerce, but I think platforms like Grab, like Gojek, like Uber, these platforms, they are really transforming as well the food marketplace. And more and more, we've been facing different models. So I think even food is facing his own, I would use the word IKEAification, that is the concept of the IKEA to buy your own, let me say, furniture, bring home, and just assemble yourself and have something nice at home, made by a guy, design guy in the Nordics. In the food space, you can be a very, let me say, almost a Michelin chef by receiving a package at home of pre-cooked stuff that you just needed to finalize at home, assemble it, and prepare a superb dinner by this. So these are all models that are changing consumption and marketplace. And of course, because of this, supply chain is like impending, and it's interesting what's really happening in the supply chain space, and I think it's going to become even more interesting right now after all that we are living. First, because we've been facing for many years that the middleman with no value added is really vanishing from the ecosystem. So if I buy in an origin country and I sell in a consumer country without any kind of value added, I'm in troubles. I will probably disappear from this marketplace. So if you are not adding value, you are out of the game. In the same way, big companies on the food space, they are looking to be super asset light. So most of these companies, they are trying to be asset light. Some of them are becoming just R&D and brand managers, what means that they are investing heavily on developed products and manage the brand or the life cycle of the products in the market. And they outsource all the production for co-packers or co-manufacturings around the world. And why this? This is to be relevant in many different markets and to be cost competitive. Because sometimes you want to be competitive in a certain market, and the market is not offering you the volume that you need to just invest on a big capex project to create a big plant in that location. So I'll go there, I listen to the consumer, I understand what the consumer wants, I use my R&D capability, but I will outsource production. So this is another transformation. The other transformation that we've been facing is that there is a lot of direct access from consumer to production. So many interesting models, innovative models, some that are, let me say, blooming, some others that are, I think, not that good, but are walking as well. So in some countries around the world, you can crowdfund to buy like an animal to be later slaughtered, and you can buy the pieces of meat that you want based on your contribution. So this is an interesting model that we have in some countries. In some others, you have the basic concept of I have a basket of fruits or a basket of vegetables coming to my home that theoretically or in the reality, is coming direct from farmers. And the most interesting stuff is that having this in place, this is opening a lot of opportunity for farmers to start creating capabilities of the midstream part of the value chain. So one example that is interesting that I would like to share with you is the example of a company in the Netherlands, a group of farmers in the Netherlands. They produce leaves for Albert Heijn, for a retail chain over there, and these leaves they are packed in a controlled environment type of package, so they can stay longer in the shelves and they can stay longer on your fridge as well, and they can grow in this controlled environment. So examples like these are completely changing the food supply chain. Okay. Any question? Please just interrupt. It's an open conversation. Okay. But many things are happening, but it doesn't mean that we are really using the edge of the innovative enablers. Okay. What I want to say is that this is my POV of adoption of innovation or adoption of technology innovation before what I'm calling weird times. Okay, so I've been facing that companies are getting inspired, and getting inspired by different ways. Getting inspired by the CEO that jumps into a flight from Netherlands to Asia Pacific and reads on a magazine that blockchain is the solution for traceability. Or the guys that went into a hackathon and saw a bunch of nice, innovative ways of let me say, control for use of chemicals in the plantation. So a lot of sources of inspiration. In the same way, what we've been facing is that companies are not doing great progress. They are stopping somehow in proof of concept or in pilot of the solutions, or we can call MVPs as well, MVP stage here. And the reason most of these is these companies, they are not properly equipped with data, or let me say, they don't have a sample of data enough to prove these solutions. The second point that I think it's important to emphasize is that most of the time what we face is that some small companies, startups or small companies, they bring very good ideas. They create somehow the acceptance of, let me say, the solution. But they struggle to answer the question on how to move from this page to scale. And this is something that most of the time the client does not have the answer as well. So good ideas somehow just get a landing point on this milestone. The third one is that there is a clear hybrid, let me say, population of a digital leadership, not just in the food space. I think across industries. There are industries with more maturity, some others with less maturity. The food industry, just to give you, this is based on a research we did it some years ago, 2 years ago. The agri-food industry is very good on run MVPs. It's not good from mover to MVP to scale. And on this research, we evaluated from different perspectives, from your ability to tap into the innovation ecosystem, from your ability of prove the value, from your ability to define a digital culture. And the 2 points where our industry, the industry we are discussing here, fails is on prove the value and cultural and digital culture. Okay, so this is the reason we keep circling here in the MVP and not moving further down in this point. Okay, so moving further here on this point, normally we having a good pitch, a good let me say selling speech to our idea. Normally we create the align for the urgency. And the second step on this for me is proving the value. Okay, we see here in the top the blueprint for digital. I will just skip this one because it's not that relevant, but I would move for proving value. Okay, iterate and scale. So show that this is really compelling, bold, you bring the value, and do the proper change management and scale this. So this is the, let me say, what we've been facing before the weird times. Okay. Now came 2020. That was the year written by the Stephen King and I think directed by the Quentin Tarantino. So we start having Africa swine fever. So a disease that create a big disruption here in the hogs, in the swine industry in Asia Pac, killing animals, destroying economies of countries that depends on the animal nutrition, on the animal protein industry, destroy the business for animal feed as well. Most of the big companies operating in Asia Pac that leverage and anchor the business on animal feed had a lot of issue. Okay, it would be like super hard if it was just like this, just the Africa swine fever, where we faced that the protein bucket, beef, fish, chicken, lamb, was completely unbalanced because of let me say the losses on the swine industry. More recently, and it's happening in the last 2 months, we have the locusts and the grasshoppers destroying plantations in India, in China, now in South America as well. We started by Argentina and going the south of Brazil. And it's interesting because looks like, this happens every 3 years, this kind of event with the grasshoppers. But we are facing like weird times, and these years, this year especially, the thing that we don't want is to create an imbalance in soybean and corn for the world. That is like the foundation for animal nutrition, and the foundation for human nutrition as well, foundation for biofuels. So this can generate a big crisis. Okay, so diseases and plagues is something. It was not enough. So we are facing the COVID-19 almost for, I would say, 5 months right now, something like that. Some countries 3 to 4 months. Talking about food geography, the COVID-19 is something that is really derailing the producing from the beginning of the value chain. So the first highlight is that the COVID-19 is derailing us on producing. So from the field, where we still have some crops that are non-mechanized and depend on human labor, to production. So we've been facing that big protein companies had their slaughterhouses and processing plants closed in US, closed in Brazil, closed in Poland as well. So countries that by the end are responsible for the big chunk of source of poultry and swine production in the world. In a world that suffered a little bit before with Africa swine fever. Okay, and the COVID-19 is going further down on the food supply chain. So we've been facing that the streamlined trade that we fight to equip with a blockchain to create smart contracts in origin ports, destination ports, reduce the paperwork in some ports, right now are gaining a lot of, let me say, more controls as well, because people want to evaluate the loads in the port of origin, the port of destination, make sure that this is virus-free when it's being shipped and when it's being received as well. And this is creating a big imbalance of stockpiles in the world. If we look, I think it was published yesterday, if we look for the trade agreements, US and China, volumes versus actuals consumed, we're going to see that to accomplish at least a half of the agreement, they should be able to expedite a lot of trade. What won't be possible? Won't be possible because there is a disruption in the business, but there is a disruption in the ecosystem. The freight industry is suffering from that. The cross-border operations is suffering on that. Packaging is somehow not able in some countries. So, COVID, Africa swine fever, and all that we've been living, I think in the last 12 months, I would say 12 months, it's really creating a change for what I shared with you before. So I want to start right now talking about value. So I started talking about things that trends on the agri-food space, examples of innovations, what happened, and now how this industry is responding to that. Okay, I used this example I took from a friend, and I like the clusterization in 4 buckets here, and I will try to drive the conversation into these 4 buckets. Okay, and here I want to talk about value, and we can give examples, different industries in the agri-food space, from the upstream to the end of the value chain to the downstream part. Okay, let me start by market and labor. Okay, and now you start talking about labor. So we used to, let me take one example, palm oil. Malaysia, Indonesia responds for more than 85% of the palm oil production in the world. Okay, labor intensive. We need people on the field, on the states, to do the manuring, do the harvest, do the renew of the plantation. So it's labor intensive. What's going to happen if there is a pandemic where the works cannot go to the field and cannot go to the states in Malaysia and Indonesia? 85% of, let me say, of the supply of palm oil will be under risk. And we know that when we look for palm oil, we are not talking about food. If we go for the supermarket, for the retail, and we look for a shelf of a supermarket, probably 9 in 10 products has palm oil on their bill of materials, on their formulation. So this is something that is really making the guys think about how can I be less dependent on the, let me say, human labor. Okay, and there is another guy on the table trying to see and challenge a little bit of this. Okay, but let's talk about Indonesia. How much of the economy in certain let me say locations depends on the human labor in palm plantations? So it's not the case that we can go extreme to the mechanization, and but we cannot stay where we are. So on the labor side, what we've been facing, that is for me a big pocket of opportunity right now, is how to create the different the labor of the future, for the workforce of the future, let me use the right word, for the food and agribusiness. How can I equip these workers on the right way? There are certain, let me say, certain activities that potentially they can be, let me say, take over by mechanization, by technology. There are some others that we needed to equip the people. So it's about wearables, it's about safety equipment. It's about, in the case of palm, I have something that is almost a dream for me. How can I create like a mesh network of human sensors working on the field? So these guys, geo-referentiated on the field, equipped with wearables, equipped with portable sensors, they can ground-proof a tremendous amount of data. They can use a crowdsourcing like a Waze application, something like that, do an Wazification of the workforce, where these guys, they can use a safety, let me say, features of an application to simply communicate that there is an accident or something like that. So how can I really improve the safety of the workers? This is one pocket for me of opportunity. How can I create the workforce of the future? Second, how can I mechanize as much as possible, targeting by not just replacement of human intervention, but now I'm talking about a different purpose. I want to talk about the biosecurity. So how can I take a disassembly plant of poultry and run this disassembly plant fully mechanized? How can I run a grower house with 12,000 birds without any kind of human intervention? So this is, for me, examples of pockets of opportunity, pockets of value that the companies are interested when they talk about workforce of the future. And now I'm hooking this not on the value levers from the past. Remember the value levers from the past, they were anchored on potentially G&A reduction, reduce the costs. Right now is no longer more reducing the costs. Right now we are talking about workforce protection, and we are talking about biosecurity. Okay. I want to move right now for the market part. So we mentioned that there is a big trend of direct-to-consumer strategy. And the direct-to-consumer is becoming more and more useful. And it's becoming, let me say, a trend, a big trend after COVID-19. I will use myself as a consumer example. Before pandemic, I used to go for some wet markets. I used to go to buy to try to go for some groceries and buy things on the streets. I'm trying to buy right now more and more via e-commerce. And fruits is something that I don't like to use the traditional retail on e-commerce. So I'm looking for companies like the Go Freshes and the others that offers me some direct-to-consumer platform. And I think more and more people will be looking for that. Not just ourselves, but I think the elder generation, they will look for that as well. No longer more with the same, let me say, appealing we have it. That is, I'm looking for my personal safety purpose, but they are looking for personal safety, but they are looking for convenience as well. And this is very important. Two other components that I think, and this is a little bit more for the not for the old generations, but the youngest ones. Traceability is becoming something super important, and more people wants to understand about the origin of what they are consuming, and the traceability is giving to the consumer the opportunity to understand that. So in the past, traceability had a bit of let me say, a luxury appeal. Right now, it's becoming, I want to really know if this is coming from a country where we have a social instability or a pandemic or something like that. It's not just, we are not just talking about child labor, slavery labor. It went beyond. Now what I want to know is COVID-19 free? Is free of any other disease, so I can track and trace that. And other topic that it's a buzzword for quite some time. We've been hearing blockchain for a long time, and blockchain is not getting the traction that we were all expecting. Blockchain potentially will have combined with IoT a big, let me say, relevance on the especially on the logistics of food. So more and more people want to combine mechanisms of track and trace and use blockchain to bring trust for this. So if I want to know, for an example, that I'm buying something that was transported using the right temperatures, that was let me say loaded and unloaded, really in the source and the destination without any kind of manipulation, things like that. Blockchain combined with IoT is becoming more and more useful. So the example from the previous slide, where I share that companies are becoming under pressure for additional quality inspections in the origin and in the destination, we're going to see that blockchain can be a very good solution for that. So in the first area of market and labor, I would like to emphasize that if you can anchor your solutions on these spaces to these areas, this would be good. Okay? I just want to add on something on the remote farming that is a topic that let me just use a different word here, but I think urban farmings as well is something that will be somehow creating a big change on the agri and food space. And I think when the concept of urban farming combines with the concept of platforms, like I mentioned before, Uber, Gojek, or Grab, for example, I think this will become a mega powerful concept. So solutions that comes as well on this space will be super important. Okay, I will move to the supply chain here, and I just covered the urban farming, and I want to talk about two topics that are now new in the agenda and that we needed to be aware of. So there will be a movement, a clear movement for a more silo-based economy. So it means that if you look for the supply and demand of food around the world, we have a big imbalance of supply and demand. Okay, and rely on supply as we were relying before the start of the weird times, it's no longer more acceptable. So countries are looking more and more to be not to be self-sufficient. I will not use this word, but they will try to build reserves. They will try to build some sufficiency on this space. So we know about the 30-30 program here in Singapore to produce 30% of the food by 2030, and this is becoming even more relevant. I think the program of the 30-30 in Singapore was launched before all of the world events, and now is gaining more relevance. And this is not just now in Singapore. This is everywhere. So there will be a concept that for me is a magical concept. It's like I will use a parallel here. That is, I don't know if you heard about the story in India where people started doing the cogeneration for power, for electricity on a distributed way, and this gave access of electricity for many of, let me say, small cities or small parts of the population. I see that there will be something happening with this, with food. Of course, we cannot start having, let me say, ruminants on the streets, but leaves, vegetables, some fruits, eggs, or I don't know, but there will be some changes on that. And this is one component. The other component, that this one is the part of the urban farming. The other component is that because I'm thinking about silo, I started thinking about create stockpiles of food for my country. So you have let's have an example. You have New Zealand is a country where I think they can produce everything that they eat. But if they have an imbalance on something that they depend or they rely on an external supplier, and this is relevant, I would say that they are thinking on how to build the stockpile to create a strategic reserve for them. And this kind of strategic reserve will be potentially creating some food inflation as well. And countries with more bargain power or bigger wallets, they can play like a board games on that. So the concept of strategic reserve is something super important, and it's going to play a different game. Just like this is hypothetical, but that this can happen. So if the consumption of chicken is super high in China, and China relies on chicken production from US and Brazil, and China wants to have, let me say, somehow some supply safety on that, he's gonna potentially, they can do is that they can create a big stockpiles of feed nutrition. And once we know that chicken production is about feed, they have the control, they have the natural hedge for that. So what I mean is that let's not just think about chicken is chicken, chicken is corn, chicken is soy. So and there are many other examples of things like that. So this will really create some difference. And on the supply chain as well, I would like to emphasize that I think in the moment that we reestablish let me say, the new normal for the supply chain, there will be more and more concerns about, there will be, I think the concerns on circular economy, they will come back to the table. Okay, so this is, for me, super important as well. It's an area that I think it's just on hold for some time because we need to fix the basics and move back to this, okay? I will skip the disruptions because I want to talk about this by the end, and I will move for sustainability. I think we covered a lot on the sustainability space, but just to highlight one more time, consciousness, how we can hook things on the positive impact. So most of the time we are selling geospatial or GIS solution to help palm oil farmers use less fertilizer in their states. But how can we calculate the positive impact on this for the shampoo, the Pantene? Or how can we calculate the positive impact of this for the for the chocolates. So I think we need to be more creative on understand how can we brand the sustainability contribution of innovation. Because the brand equity of the companies are not, let me say, capitalizing properly on these things. So we see companies that are, for me, outliers, like Nestlé. It's an example where they are trying to capitalize on any sustainable initiative, from the capsules of Nespresso that are that you can return to the store, and they give you a black small plastic bag made of green plastic, so you can use to return, and they recycle this, to the campaigns that they are doing about fair trade in Ivory Coast for the for beans, for cocoa beans, or even for the new R&D of Kit Kat that is fully formulated using different parts of cocoa. So they are using super well, but some other companies are not doing at all. Absolutely. So they want to show, oh, you just can scan the QR code of the papaya and you can see the, let me say, the small farm in Thailand who produces. No, it's not this. It's not this. The consumer is no longer more an idiot. The consumer is smart, is conscious. The consumer knows what are the big issues on these places. And something that is becoming bold, that is, I want to highlight this for all of you that are fighting to position your innovation in the food industry. All these kind of certification mechanisms that we have today, they needed to reinvent themselves. So I'm talking about UTZ, Rainforest Alliance, and all the others. They needed to reinvent. Because we are, the new generation, they don't want to pay to offset the damage. They want to pay to not damage. It's different. And they don't trust the offset. They want to see it. So companies, they are not just paying for paper trade certificates to be sustainable. They want to show, they need to show. So if you look for initiatives from coffee companies, from Dawegers, Nestlé, they need to show what they are doing. And if you go and position yourself as part of this, this is a tremendous area of opportunity that will be more and more valued after this COVID-19. Okay, I want to pause here. And now I'm going to move back to my original slide of innovation adoption and tell you that there is right now urgency. And what was good after COVID-19 is that if there is something that I properly and I really believe on the new normal, is that digital and innovation is the new normal. If there was this people skeptical about use innovation or use digital or adopt this, adopt that, I think if they remain on the same position for some additional months, they will be out. And simple examples. As I said to you in the beginning, I'm Brazilian, okay, and my city, that is Rio de Janeiro. We are not surfing, let me say, a huge adoption of platforms. So as we have here, Grab or Gojek, so we have a Uber over there. We have some other platforms, but the adoption is really small. It's not a consumer adoption. It's the business adopting that. Do you know what happened in the early of the COVID-19 in my city? All this business, any business, I can talk about food, but I can talk about any other business. These guys, they simply broke because they were not able to adopt all of these. So they were not able to simply capture an order through a platform, make an electronic transaction for payment, and book a logistics to deliver. Something that I think we are not, let me say, somehow when we use Grab or any platform to perform a transaction, we are not thinking about the amount of transformation that comes behind all of this. And now what we are facing is that all these companies, they are looking to that. So right now, don't get like sleeping on, try to make a pocket of progress. Align on the urgency. Try to understand the real burning platform of your target industry. Create a compelling business case and try to target and hook value levers that I gave you as an example that are becoming super relevant on the agenda of these companies. And prepare yourself to show, hey, this is a proven solution. I want to just give you a flavor that I can help you and that I can scale you this on a fast way. So speed to deliver is super important. There is no more space to not have a speed to deliver. And of course, show to these companies that they can become truly digital on a fast way. So the moment is now. For me, the mantra is prove the value, iterate, and scale. This is what is required right now. So companies like startups or innovators, they need to be smart enough to hook on these new value levers, prove this value, and make sure that you can scale this fast. Okay? So this is what I have to share with you. Open for questions, discussions, and everything. Okay?
Thanks so much, Otavio.
Yeah, thanks. It was very interesting and comprehensive presentation, and I think it was a really interesting guide in terms of what is happening on the market of agriculture and agri-processing at all, and the food market in general. But also I think it was a very interesting insights about those technologies that are going to disrupt, but also have the potential to change how we produce, consume food, how the food is basically moving from one part of the world to another part of the world. Of course, one of the topics that we had a chance to discuss with Accenture colleagues on the food traceability, and I know that we have a couple of startups that are dealing with the blockchain, and they've been exploring this kind of opportunities. So thank you very much. It was very interesting, and I think now we can open the floor to our participants to raise your questions, comments. I think this is a great opportunity to direct your questions now.
Thank you. My pleasure, Armin.
Thank you. I know how it worked in Zoom. Not sure how it works in Microsoft Teams. Do we receive it?
Yeah, we have a small icon here where we have the chat.
Okay. So, colleagues, you can just put your questions in that chat. Okay.
Yeah, I have a question from Alexander here. So, can I start taking the questions, Armin? And
yeah, I think
sure.
It would be easy.
Yeah.
Okay, so the question from Alexander is, thanks for the question, Alexander. Let me see if I can properly answer. Otherwise, I'll share my emails and we can try to discuss later, okay? What do you think of the readiness of the smallholder farmer to adopt the digital road? I think it's a fantastic question, and I love this topic. This is my favorite one. I think I share with Armin that this is really my big passion. And the answer is, I think they are keen. They cannot afford, and the road needs to make something to happen. And I've seen companies with a mindset of helping because it's important for them. For example, let me take the example of cocoa beans in Ivory Coast. Okay, I will just not disclosure name of companies, but I will disclosure what was the mindset on this. So this company is one of the biggest, let me say, originators of cocoa beans in Ivory Coast, and they needed to streamline. And we know that the flow from forests to beans in the middleman is something completely unfair. So what this company they created is they created a platform where even smallholder farmers in any place in Ivory Coast, they can use this platform to log their harvest, create their batches, and do the consolidation of their loads. So this company helped smallholder farmers not just let me say work better, but have a fair piece of the trade as well, because they were properly equipped on a way that they replaced the middleman on this. So I think we needed to think about how to help smallholders adopt from different perspectives, not from the perspective of enrich the way they are working, but thinking on how can we hook these kind of solutions for big cargills, Bunge, ADMs, Nestle, on a way that they can have a lot of value from this. So I believe that the hubs can be fund this kind of transformation for smallholder farms. Okay? I don't know if it is answering your question, but this is my POV on this. Okay, readiness is something that depends from country to country, but I think they are key. They are key if they need money. We need to be pragmatic on the money for them. So a fair piece of the trade, piece of the cash. Okay?
Thanks, Otavio.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. We have a question from Claire here.
Yeah.
We have a bioherbicide product for smallholder farms to help them fight a parasitic weed. That is, just a second, sorry. There is one component of our substrate that we consider sourcing internationally pre-COVID. However, should we consider testing the substrate ingredient and try to stick to the absolutely. Claire, I think that is something super important. I will give you a parallel example. The animal feed industry is trying to make something that I like. This is the indigenous concept. So, for example, if I have in Pakistan, let me say, certain amount of biomass available that can have the same nutrients of what the other industries are using on a traditional way, why I don't go and break a little bit all these rules of the normal and try to test available biomass or available nutrition parts in different countries. I know that this brings complexity from an R&D and formulation perspective, but this goes into the direction of the topic that we discussed a little bit earlier. That is because we are running more in silos, I believe that there will be much more, let me say, distributed type of production. And availability of raw materials is super important. It's really something both. So if you have the opportunity to replace it for something that is available or tropicalize your product for different destinations, this is super interesting. Super interesting. Okay, and we have, I think, iconic examples of products that were not able to, let me say, to really bloom in the market because examples like the one that you just gave. Very good point. I think It's fantastic. And I met last year in an event a company that is preparing animal nutrition based on local biomass. So they have a formulation for Thailand, formulation for Malaysia, formulation different from Pakistan. Super interesting. That. So really encourage you to look for that. Okay. Daniele, Steponics, in terms of mechanism for urban farms or small production players, how feasible commercial is it for them to partake in mechanization if this could potentially drive up cost production in the context of growing food necessities? Yeah, very good point, Danielle. Food safety is a major concern. Is really a major concern. So everything that requires manipulation needs to find its own way to cope with biosecurity. So it's you are absolutely right. Your question is amazing. It's a dilemma. It's really for me a good dilemma right now. We've been facing that, for example, for kitchens and for restaurants, we've been facing that robotization of kitchens is really a trend, and it's going to be accelerated. I think there should be a way to cope with biosecurity as well for urban farms, because I really believe on the concept. I just don't have the answer for you what would be the solution for the biosecurity part, but became a super relevant topic. You are absolutely right. For an example, let me give you a consumer example. I'm craving to have a sashimi for some days, but I will not go for a sashimi at all. So I think it's a silly example, but you can make a parallel of what I'm talking about. Okay. We have another one. What do you think about pivoting to create a solution for kids on WhatsApp as a smaller farms to have a smartphone, especially for WhatsApp purpose as well to the best available services can provide it to them adult and I really like it. I mentioned that I think crowdsourcing components is a very, very interesting way of leverage labor-intensive crops workers to become, let me say, data sources. I would not just stick to WhatsApp. If try to understand in your target industry where is your target countries and understand which platform fits better for this, and try to understand that a messenger solution is one component, but you need more important than the messenger. You need some georefferentiation. That it's I would say that Waze is a better basis than a WhatsApp by the end. Okay. Waze is a conceptual platform, gives you location, gives you ability to log things, read things real time on a super visual way. The point that I would say it's even more important to chase a little bit of this idea, human natural language. So remember that workers on the field, they need to have 2 hands free to work. Okay, so the big challenge we still have is to move from devices to wearables. Okay, so there is a tremendous space. I can tell you, I investigated this. There are great solutions for the real estate industry. So and big capex industry. So the guys, they equip the workers in these big constructions with wearables, and they can be traced and they can communicate and receive things in the same way. But I've never seen such solution for the agribusiness or for plantation space. This is a very good idea in an open space today. Yeah, Aisha, do you think food exports imports will fall post-COVID, so more localized consumption? I think there will be big challenge on cross-border food. I'm not saying that there won't be. There will be, but it's going to be difficult. So think about the planning part of the business that considers lead time. They need to rethink their lead times because it's no longer more so streamlined as it was before. And if you look for the progress we did trying to use, for example, blockchain for smart contracts and try to streamline all of this, we lost a little bit of that. So we needed to bring some innovative ways to cope with this lack of agility that we had. Let me see, I lost a bit the tracker here, just a second.
Maybe I can help. Okay, the next question, we have a follow-up from Alexander. He says their startup has a protected cropping technology using a colored film to improve food production in a more controlled manner. Can you share the trend and growth of such protected cropping, for example, like greenhouse or glass house, etc.?
Production and control. Can you share the trend and growth of protected cropping? Alexander, I needed to look for that. I don't have the numbers or the trends, but I would say that this is linked to other questions that we have here, and I see that this will get traction. And this is something, one more time, we are not talking about new stuff here. We are talking about things that potentially will be super accelerated right now. Okay, but drop me an email and I can take a look for you on that. What advice do you have for platforms that relies on extension services to workers to deliver advisory services to smallholders, especially to adapt to COVID-19 challenge? What advice do you have to platforms? Your job, this concept is quite nice. It's not new as well. The advice I would give you is to, I don't know what is the challenge you have to create a massive adoption. If it's infrastructure or if it's like some incentives that are missing here. So in both cases, we worked a long time ago in a solution for Africa, and for infrastructure, we partnered with a telco company. So this telco company was interested on partner with us on that. And on the incentives side, there was a company that was interested on gain market share in that region as well. And they were the ones offering, let me say, financial incentives for these guys to follow these crop techniques and use their products as well. So I think, Job, the advice, summarizing the advice, is to think about the ecosystem. And the ecosystem, sometimes it's so rich that we just cannot foresee who are really the guys that can make a bold change. One example, simple example here about this concept of ecosystem. More than 14 years ago in Brazil, there was a company trying to increase origination of soybean in the north of Brazil. And this company, they were like looking for many ways. So they are saying, hey, we can pay even more, a price premium for these guys. But the point is that no one of these guys, they were looking just for a premium price. They need money for the day-to-day. and they need money because they need gas, fuel to put on the trucks, for an example. So this company, they partner with a big oil and gas company. They developed a triangle barter solution where their suppliers, they can go for a gas station, refuel their trucks. This creates an entry on their accounting. And when this guy goes to deliver the grains in the silo, they just do the conciliation and pay against the conciliation. So try to understand who are the players that are really involved on that. I think this is where the answer for this is. It's amazing the amount of things that we can do for smallholders in the world, and I think we just need to be creative on how to engage with the ecosystem.
Thanks, Otavio. Are there any other questions from the participants?
I was wondering if I can verbally ask a question.
Sure. Go ahead, Danielle.
Hi, Lopes. Thank you for sharing all the detailed answers to the questions we mentioned earlier. I actually earlier raised a question on mechanism, something maybe more in terms of how like small production players or urban farmers, how feasible is it for them to include mechanism as part of their, like, I would say, farming process as well? Because from a business perspective, this could potentially drive up the cost of production. And if we are growing like vegetables, or if we are growing some other produce that are, like sometimes which could be low value, what is the feasibility of like an introduction for mechanism?
Okay. Yeah. Have you heard about you don't need to have tools at your home right now. There are many like players today where you buy something and you just can put on a website and rent this. So I can rent this device in a website. So I'm sweating the asset by putting this, and this is being shared on this website. People use and bring me back, pay for use. It helps me capitalize this one. It helps me with the payback of my investment, and it helps a lot with others that cannot afford to have this at home, but by the end they deliver what they need. So in the same way that we are talking about distributed production, try to think about and this is a reality for agribusiness today. It's not the case that all the companies that are using mechanization, they have their own machines. So if you make your research, you're going to see that this is a big trend, especially in countries where you have a presence of smallholders. Companies that are, not companies, sorry, platforms where you have an equipment and you use it 20% of the time, you can rent 80% of the time.
I see. It's like a need spaces, basically.
Exactly.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is a very good idea.
Okay, understood.
Yeah.
This is more, I would say, prevalent in other countries. Earlier you mentioned do you have any examples or anything that could potentially aid in, like, if I were to do research after this?
Yes, I have the name of the company here.
Okay.
One example, I can give you one of the examples of platforms like this. I will look here and I'll give you one example.
Okay, thank you, Lopes.
Yeah. I'm just looking here to give you the name. But meanwhile, if there is any other question, then I can answer more than happy.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to find here the name of one example for you.
Thanks, Otavio. I think we can accept the last question, which is actually from Williams, asking if there are any identified ASEAN specificities in customer trends from what you presented? So like customer trends that are specific to this region, and also do you see a growing aging population to follow the same kind of trends?
Just a second. Sorry, I'm back here. So let me see the question because I was trying to find. Is there Asian specificities on consumer trends from what you present? Do you have also a growing aging population to follow the same trends? Williams, I think the answer is yes, we have some degree of this. I think adoption of everything that we discussed here is somehow accelerated in ASEAN. The values from consumers potentially are different. Okay, so there is a strong conception that sustainability is still a Western concept, and it's coming from Western to Eastern. I think this is really accelerating, but the adoption of everything we described here is much more accelerated here than, for example, in Europe or in US and South America. So I've been facing that real opportunities for this, the pockets that we discussed here are really here. Of course, there is as I gave the example, there is a blank page in Brazil, blank page. But I think we were not talking about blank page here. We are talking about the second, let me say, wave of transformation. And there are countries that are still doing the first wave of transformation. It's a very good question indeed, Williams, because I believe that, for example, there is a tremendous opportunity in Africa to create this first wave of innovation. And there was a very interesting article that was published 2 days ago by Rabobank, showing that one of the let me say the trends after this all the weird times is that there will be a movement to create less density on population. So there will be people moving from small cities, urban areas. Okay, and this will really potentially expedite a lot of these new smallholders. This will be something super good, for example, on his point of view, to really develop Africa, for example. So I believe that in ASEAN we are accelerated with some different value levers. I think we have a convenience as a big topic here, but the sustainability will increase. Biosecurity is coming bold as well. So there will be change. I can tell you, the Singapore, for example, has a tremendous concern with one of their main traditions, that is the street food here. How they can control better street food? How can we control better the water? So this is the reality, Williams, by the end.
Thanks, Otavio, for that answer, and